area, and also hopefully dissuade the illegal fly tipping going on. A local lettings policy will be applied to the 9 units with an opportunity to benefit households in the immediate area. And finally, Derby Homes acknowledges and regrets the environmental impact of our proposals, but as a subsidiary of the City Council, we will be committed to the reasonable environmental mitigations and conditions as part of the planning permission as put forward by DCC Parks, the Environmental Protection Officer and the Planning Authority. That, Chair, committee concludes my contribution to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Mosley. Mr. Mosley, I have been made aware of a health issue that you've had, and I'd say on behalf of everybody here that we wish you a full recovery, and for that purpose, I will allow you an extra minute.
Hello, I'm a local resident and completely against the proposed development. I live on Farm Street. My house is back directly onto the park. They talk about back-to-back gardens, so how we're going to have privacy. The rewilding project from Majesty Park has been paused for consultation events taking place later this year. There's been no consultation with the people in Stockbrook about this development. The council talk of drug dealing, burnt out cars, antisocial behaviour, sexual activity and fly tipping as issues. Well, I've lived there for 30 years, never seen a drug deal on the park. It's open, wide open, can be viewed from the houses. It's a stupid place. The car park, burnt out cars, I've lived there 30 years and there's been one burnt out car, so that's not an issue. Antisocial behaviour. I've reported one incident in 30 years to the police, just one incident. I admit there's fly tipping, but there's fly tipping across the whole of Stockbrook and literally every street. Fly tipping has got worse since the council have stopped doing their bulky waste collections. It's a very poor area and people haven't got money to pay to get rid of the rubbish. I was interviewed by Derbyshire Live a few months ago and expressed my concerns to them. One of my biggest concerns were the trees marked for destruction. They are home to a large number of bats. However, there was nothing in the newspaper about it, even though he asked me to forward a video item of them. So I asked the council, do they vet what Derbyshire Live put in the paper? Because it seems very strange, because we spent a lot of time talking about it. I've lived there for 30 years, enjoy watching them. The council report on the bat said there's no suitable roosting sites within 0.8 kilometres of the site. Obviously false. They also said that the trees were very small or semi-mature. False. They're large established trees, fully mature, drenched in ivy, which is ideal for bats. They're over 50 feet tall and not semi-mature at all. The local residents have asked in the past for the trees to be pruned and tidied up around the base. The council have replied, yes, we can tidy up around the base, but we can't touch the trees. We can't even chop a branch off them because they're known as bat roosts. And that's come from the council itself, either the Parks Department or the Green Spaces. I've got local residents willing to confirm this on record, that it's true. I do have any video evidence of the bats, just 30 seconds. You can see how many there is. It's a proper roost. They're just flying round and round that tree. So, due to advice I've received about protecting the bats, I've been told do nothing because there'll be a very brave council to give a green light from the evidence I've got. If it's approved, then email us back. If anybody tries to cut the trees down straight away, call the police. Explain the situation, tell him you believe there's a crime being committed, and they say this must get a crime number. The development will cause a huge will cause a load of traffic problems in the area, where streets are parked on both sides and both corners, where council bin lorries regularly miss street collections due not being able to gain access. Mine have been missed at least 10 times in the last 12 months. Feel free to check on your records how often they are missed. The local councillor, Sue Bonser, suggested they're trying to get a smaller bin lorry.
Mr. Mosley, I'm sorry, but I have to stop you there. I have given you an extra minute, so... Sarah, did you want to come back on any of that?
Yeah, just in relation to concerns about bats, I've just looked at Derbyshire Wildlife Trust comments that they've made during the application, and they've recommended swift bricks, so we can add bat boxes to their recommended biodiversity enhancement and management plan, which will be subject to a condition of the permission. In terms of the issues that are in related or of fly tipping and antisocial behaviour, we did seek some confirmation from our parks colleagues about what issues they've been having on that area and what they've done to deal with it. We basically were advised that they have had persistent fly tipping problems in the area and related drugs use, which has been an issue. So they've dealt with them through cleaning up and through public protection officers, but they are particularly persistent issues. We haven't had the resources that we can do much more about. They go on to say that they don't have the resources to deal with it as a permanent solution. So obviously we take our parks colleagues' advice because they manage Stockbrook Keep Park on behalf of the council. Other than that, no, I've got nothing else.
Thank you, Sarah. Mr. Shergill, did you want to add anything to it?
Not really. The tree survey supplied was adequate for assessing the trees. So I've got no issues with that and the tree categorisation of the trees.
Okay, we have two further speakers, and purely on alphabetical order. Councillor Graves first.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. This issue was first raised, although it's not in the area that I represent on the council. This issue came to the Alveston Park Friends, and all the Friends groups across the city have been aware of this issue. And the reason it's a big issue for the Park Friends around the city is because you're taking up parkland, you're taking up public open space, when really what we should be doing as local elected representatives is protecting all public open space for everybody to use when they wish to use it. Now, I've been listening to some of the issues here tonight, and this area can't be classed as unused. It is used. I mean, there's a lot of activity. Some of it you don't like, but some of it is people using the public open space. And what this application is doing, which I find incredible that it's actually come from basically a council department, although an ALMO, to put housing on and stop people using an area of land that is being used. Now, to me, it's about the precedent. If we start using park space for building, then what's to stop you and anybody else putting an application in for other parkland around the city? So whilst it's located in the Stockbrook area, this can have a massive impact on all the parks in our city. Now, I understand the issues about lack of housing, and yes, I think the council has a problem in that we don't have enough housing for everybody, but what we mustn't do is take up parkland for it. And this application, I listened to the officer at the front there and saying it's only taking up 5% of the parkland. Well, I'm sorry, but 5% is a huge amount of land. Imagine taking 5% of Markeaton Park. You can build an estate. All right, so 5% is a large area. And is this what we should be doing as a local authority? Taking up land that is used for the general public? Because I don't think that's what we're here for. I think we should be looking for brownfield sites for these sort of developments, not greenfield sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Councillor Hazelgrave.
Thank you for indulgence, Chair and Committee. My initial reaction to this proposal was against, as I was contacted by a resident and not given the full picture in his info. I was led to believe it would be an HMO. When I looked at the application, I changed my mind. The car park is not used much, is effectively a convenient place to park for a local businessman with his vans, is a dumping ground for fly tipping, and at one time at night was used for casual sex in cars. I can leave it to your imagination what was thrown out of the window post-coitally. The new build will overlook the park prominently and will give park users some measure of reassurance and safety. Parking access to the park is available off Stockbrook Street by Brownbrook Community Centre with a ramp onto the park there for disabled users. The loss of mature trees is already offset by the planting of an orchard on the park near the proposed development, which is over and above the 24 trees stipulated in the conditions. Nobody wants to live by a building site, so Farm Street residents' concerns are understandable, but not life-changing. The provision of some 4-bedroom houses by Derby Homes with modern build and energy efficiency is what pleases me most about this development. We desperately need affordable homes of this size in the city. I submit, committee, that for the large families that move into these houses, it will be life-changing. There are 2 primary schools rated good by Ofsted within walking distance, and Bemrose, good by Ofsted, is also relatively nearby, with all-through education from 5 to 18. There's a pharmacy at the top of Stockbrook Street, and the new Lidl is nearby, along with the small Sainsbury's on Boyer Street. Like all planning applications, this one is unique and is considered on its merits. Granting the application in no way opens the door to encroachment on parks by other applications, and I am sure that you, councillors, will be the custodians of this when future applications relating to use of parkland are considered. It is also pleasing that there is a bias towards local residents when the new houses are let. I ask the Planning Committee to support this application, as recommended, with conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelgrave. Before I open it up to the committee, one thing you have to remember, this is social housing and not a block of flats or apartments or several HIMOs being put here. Yes, there is loss of public space, but I believe the benefits outweigh that. Would members of the committee like to make any contribution? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I think on balance, you're correct, and particularly like the inclusion of 4-bedroom homes, which I know Derby Homes are desperately short of. I'm slightly uneasy about the precedent for using a piece of parkland, and I hear what Councillor Hazelgrave just said. We need to be very vigilant that this is not the end of the wedge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Kerr.
I find this really difficult because I ought to start saying that I'm one of the councillor representatives on the Derby Homes board. So I've seen this from their side, and the explanations that were given about the desperate need for additional affordable housing in Derby is something that comes up very frequently. So the housing is desperately needed. What I'm more concerned about is the precedents, as has been mentioned already. But I'm also aware that this, as a poorly used car park, the actual value of this area isn't that great to the users of the park. There's been quite a lot of talk about the value of the park for wildlife and the importance of the biodiversity and the trees, but it's actually also the value of the park that is needed. And on the plan that we've got shown at the moment, you can see that there are desire lines for walking on, which are fine in dry weather, but it is actually quite difficult, even on a day like this, it's really quite soggy. And it's difficult to walk along, but they are clearly paths that people would use if they were made more usable. So there is great scope for this park to be a better park for local people. It's got very little in the way of seats, for example, so people don't stay in the park and enjoy the greenness and the open atmosphere, because It isn't easy to stop. There are some seats near the play area, but there are issues about sitting staring at other people's children, obviously. So I think there is scope here for Derby Homes to put in an element of support and improvement to the open space as a contribution, and I think that I'd put in I would like there to be an expectation that there is a contribution to the value of the park, not just for wildlife, but for users, human users of the park. And I think that needs to be discussed with the community through the neighbourhood board or through the various community groups that meet either at the community centre there or other ones nearby. I'm not quite sure how that can be managed, but within Derby and Derby Homes, I think that should be achievable. The other thing is the hard red line that we've got there at the moment needs to be softened when the building is done, if we approve its use. And the areas of grassland which are adjacent to the park, I think need to be transferred back into parkland. So the area there where the trees are towards the left-hand side, and probably also the car parking, I think that should be transferred back to the park so it then becomes less than 5% of park that is actually lost. And again, I think that is something that we ought to be able to negotiate. I am concerned about the comments about bats, because bats can nest in trees, and the fact that there hasn't been a consideration done about the bats' use of those trees I think should be done before any work is done in that area, and we need to ensure that there is no damage done to the living conditions of those bats as far as we possibly can. So, Chair, those are my 2 points, that the land needs to be transferred, the park areas that are adjacent to the park should be transferred back to the park once the development has been completed, and there should be some financial transfer to enhance the park in consultation with local people. That is, Chair, if we approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Although I'm not a chair, vice chair or an officer of Derby Homes, I do sit on the board as well. And I'm not looking at this from Derby Homes perspective and planning committee perspective. I'm looking at this as social housing, whether it be Derby Homes, Metropolitan, Strata or Derwent. Sarah, would you like to comment on any of the things that Councillor Kerr has said?
Yes, Chair, I'm just looking at the revised ecological assessment, which has been done for the site, just to see. I mean, normally, yes, in terms of bats, they have surveyed for bats and identified. So I think bats have been considered as part of the ecological assessment, and therefore they would form part of a mitigation package, which is the Biodiversity Enhancement and Management Plan. And I've made a note so we can specifically include that in the condition if members wish. In terms of the land that is on the plan but not part of the park, I mean, I can't speak for Derby Homes, but I would imagine that Derby Homes just want the houses and the access. They probably don't want to be managing the open space as well. So I don't think that would be an issue. But again, we certainly can make sure that that is transferred to contact with Derby Homes.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Protter.
2 things, probably the first thing out the way really first. If the 2 of you are on the Derby Homes board, is there any conflict of interest here in this committee?
Well, certainly not from my side, Councillor Kerr. No.
Okay, well,
yes, yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, neither of us has advocated this in Derby board meetings. Derby Homes meetings.
It's not been discussed at any Derby Homes meeting. We haven't sat down with Derby Homes officers or anything like that, so it's purely an application coming to us here.
Okay, right, well, I'll carry on. Obviously, we are desperate for council houses in the city, but if the council was serious about building council houses, then maybe we should have built the development in Chester Green instead of supporting a stunt school on what was a fantastic opportunity for council houses. The area here has been described as underserved with open space, which is a very poor place, therefore, to build houses. The biodiversity in the park can be done at any time. It just requires the will of the council to do so. So saying that this will improve the biodiversity of the park is a poor excuse for what we've done with our parks, which is reduce the biodiversity to very little. It sets a very dangerous precedent building on the parks, particularly the antisocial behaviour aspect of the excuses. If we were going to build because of antisocial behaviour, then surely we will fill the Arboretum Park with a huge block of flats, because the antisocial behaviour in our parks is nothing to do with the fact that their location. It is to do with the way that we run this city and the poor enforcement and the way that the police and the public protection officers are underfunded and understaffed. So it breaches council policy as well. We've had that. I really see nothing positive about this. So we're just going to fill Allestree Park. We're going to fill the other parks with housing. I'm really concerned at the precedent that this sets, and I think the excuses are very poor.
Did you want to come back on that, Sarah, at all?
No, I've got nothing further to add on that.
Ian?
Yeah, just up one point there, Chair. In terms of precedent, I mean, you'll be aware that each case is looked at carefully on its merits. The way that the report spells it out does indicate clearly that it's contrary to policy CP17 in terms of the protection of open spaces, and it also says it is a finely balanced proposal, which you've talked about. We have released bits of open space in the past on this committee, with car park extensions up at in Mackworth to serve the district centre, and also down near the Indian Community Centre, and they haven't opened the doors to carving up public open space. We look at things very carefully. If we're presented with these schemes, we have to be mindful of the content of the proposal, what they're delivering. Some of the metrics that Mark Crown has talked about clearly indicate the need in this particular area for family affordable accommodation. So all those factors go into the planning balance and the mix that you have to consider in terms of the benefits of this proposal. Clearly, if another proposal came in for public open space elsewhere in the city, we would look very carefully at the locational merits and the benefits and disbenefits of those proposals. So we have to be consistent in the decision-making process, of course, but we have to be mindful of each case looked at. It turns on its own facts, and we look at them on their merits. So that's the way we deal with them, Chair, and you'll be aware of those previous cases because you were, I think, in the chair.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yes, I was, and the one in Mackworth in particular, where we gave open space to have a car park for people who were using the district shopping centre, and also the problems we had at Normanton with the Indian Community Centre and that parking. And since they've done that, and in Mackworth, we've had no problems, and people have been grateful for what has been done for them. I have been on this committee for 20 years, and as most of you know, I don't follow, a laid path. Each application I've always sort of seen as, honest merit. And yes, this is loss of some public space with the car park. Don't forget there is a car park. And, if we want to give good accommodation to families, and in this case, you have 2, 3, and 4 bedroom houses being built there, albeit 9, but it does help families to live as families and not be cooped up in HIMOs and flats that are suitable for one person, and a family has to live there. So I believe in this instance that the benefits of this development outweigh the loss of a small amount of public space. Is there anybody else? Councillor West, I forgot you.
How dare you, Chair? Thank you. Though you have... though you have already said some of the things I was going to say. But 1 in 208 people in England are experiencing homelessness. 1.2 million households are on social housing waiting lists in England. Everyone deserves a safe place to call home. We've seen many years where we as a council haven't had a 5-year housing supply, and whilst that remains the case, these types of developments will keep coming along for consideration. Whilst I do dislike the idea of losing some of a park I played in as a child, and I dislike the idea of losing some of a car park, though I've never seen it full, I don't agree that this will set a precedent. We as a committee, as you have said, Chair, have always, in the 8 years I've been a member, considered each application individually. I do know there's a lack of social housing in Derby, and I know the importance of good social housing, and note these planned houses will provide homes for 9 families. This application may be contrary to one policy, but is supported by the others listed on page 48. At my first planning training, I was taught to consider whether the benefit outweighed the harm, and in this case, I believe it does. I would also support Councillor Kerr's suggestion for extra seating to be installed on the park and for the ownership of some of the land, including the car park, to be transferred back to the parks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor West. Apologies for letting Councillor Prosser get in front of you, but I'm sure we'll sort that out next time. But yes, you are right. It's not going to set precedents. And in my summing up for the Mackworth case, sometimes we have to look at what the communities need and not just stick to a policy. I've been advocating the fact that we should look at, ways of updating our policy to suit the current situation in our city and not be hindered by planning laws that were, made 20 years ago, or the fact that we can't break the shackles on some of them. This is a case where the benefit does outweigh the loss. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd also like to thank Sarah and Ian for their explanations and comments to the committee. We've heard from Sarah that the bat situation will hopefully be included. We've also heard from Ian about the every case being taken on its merits. Very shortly, this committee will be arguing about the scourge of HMOs. This development gives us a chance just to give families a home and not have to live in a HMO. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself agreeing largely with Councillor West's excellent contribution as always, and I know other members of the committee will miss Councillor West and her knowledge and commitment to planning.
She's not part of this application, Councillor Rawson. Carry on.
My question is in terms of mitigation again for residents, current residents of May Street and Farm Street. Has there been given any consideration for either hedges or trees along that boundary to sort of try and mitigate against the loss of the open land should residents choose to take that up?
There isn't anything specifically in the conditions. I mean, boundary treatment will be a condition, which obviously is will include the boundaries between existing houses and the proposed. So we can beef up that condition to make sure that a decent boundary treatment is included, if you wish.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Would somebody like to move this with the conditions that Councillor Kerr has asked? Councillor West. Move. Seconder. All those in favour of the recommendation with the added conditions?
Including the boundaries and transfer of land.
All those in favour? Anybody against? Okay.
7 in favour, 2 against.
I'm glad
Chair.
you sat on one side. I nearly missed you. Thank you. That is carried.
You'll be very pleased to know, Chair, I've got nothing further to add to the report, and I invite Councillor Cuss to present his opinions to members. Thank you.
Councillor Cuss, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. As outlined in my original objection, there is already a parking issue on Burnside Street. This is backed up when speaking to residents who live there. The supporting evidence from the residential car parking research reports shows that there will be 0.3 vehicles per person in the HMO. However, this is based on outdated report and based on flats, not HMOs. Firstly, the HMO is nearly an hour walk to the city centre, making it more desirable for the residents to have a car, whereas the reference report is probably based on flats within a short distance walk to the city centre. Secondly, the reference report is from 2007, a report that is 16 years old, and car ownership since then has increased, meaning that the 0.3 figure is probably incorrect. Well, it will be incorrect. The original application was for 6, and it would be concerning to set a standard for future HMOs that want 9 or more people to firstly apply for 6, and knowing that they could get accepted if they reapply for 9 or more people. There is already a high number of HMOs in the area, and another reason why Section 4 is needed to be implemented in this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuss. Did you want to come back on any of that, Ian?
No, thank you, Chair. I mean, Chris Stall is here tonight if he wants to comment on the adequacy of those statistics that Councillor Cuss was talking about.
Chris?
Mine's not working. Oh, we got it. We got this one now. Okay, start again. The information we have is the only information that's out in the public domain that we can use to calculate impacts of the site. The application itself, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as highways are concerned, is for 3 extra persons. It'd be very, very difficult to argue that any additional vehicles associated with them is going to cause a severe impact on the highway.
Thank you. Members of the committee. Well, I find myself agreeing with... Oh, sorry, Councillor Prosser.
Yes, sir, I'll only be quick. I used to live on that picture. The police used to visit regularly due to parking issues because, well, I think it's probably quietened down since I left. Yeah, I'm sure it has. But parking in that area is terrible. One HMO on our street, a guy moved in with 3 cars, one man, in one small house. And I know that that's kind of irrelevant, but it is just around the corner from here. And HMOs, regardless of how many people live there, do create a lot more cars in the street than a regular house. And an extra 3 people is relevant because, I mean, a lot of people have 2 cars in a house, a husband and wife go to different work, and it would be better if they didn't, but it often is the case. And you can see there's very limited parking in that area. So personally, I don't like the extra parking. I know it's a real problem for us and HMOs in the area. We've pushed this so many times before, but I think it is a problem in that street.
Thank you, Councillor Prosser. Well, I find myself agreeing with Councillor Cuss on this, that this is another backdoor, way to increase the number of people living in. And I've said this in the past, where developers have come in and said we're going to build 13 apartments, and then said, oh, we want 15 or 16. And we just have to put a stop to this and say, look, if you're buying a house with 6 occupants, that's all you're getting. And developers are buying these and then saying, we'll want to increase the occupancy by 2 or 3. Well, 3 people being increased in a house that's got 6, that's 50% increase in that. And for the life of me, I can't understand why we always, we mentioned here that we look at policies, applications individually. But when it comes to something like this, houses in multiple occupation, each time there's an increase in a street where there's 3 applications come in with 2 or 3 occupancy increases, that's an extra 9, 10 people in the street. And we have to look at it and say to developers, we want you to invest money in Derby. We want you to profit from Derby, but not at the expense of our residents. And, it's just something that has to be decided, that we, looking at better accommodation, we want more communal spaces. We don't want people who are desperate for accommodation to be cooped up in chicken huts like this, right? We should have accommodation. I don't have anything against time house, providing they're in suitable areas and they house suitable number of people. But I agree with you that this is another back way, sort of channel into increasing their revenue by 50% at the expense of the residents of Burnside Street. Councillor West.
Very briefly, thank you, Chair. I think whether it's a backdoor application or a genuine application, I think it will have an adverse impact on the local area and therefore can't support it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Prosser, you've spoken once already, so I can't let you go again. Anybody else? No? Okay, would somebody like to put it to the vote? Nobody wants to put it to the vote? Well, you can vote against it, but put it to the vote at least. Do I have a seconder? Okay, all those in favour of granting the permission with conditions? All those against? Okay, the application is refused. Reasons, Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. For the last time, at least for a few years, can I suggest that, in the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposal would have a detrimental impact on the character of the immediate area and the residential amenities enjoyed by existing neighbours in terms of increased activities, associated disturbance and the over-intensification of the use of this dwelling house. The proposal would also serve to increase pressure on existing on-street parking levels on surrounding highways, which would also, as a result, detrimentally impact on neighbouring amenities. For these reasons, the proposal is contrary to Safe Policy GD5 of the adopted City of Derby Local Plan Review and the overarching guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, which seeks to protect the amenities of individuals who are affected by the development of land and buildings. And yes, I will forward that word.
Thank you, Councillor West. You managed to write that up very quickly in your shorthand. Yes, I agree with what you've said, and those of you that know Burnside Street will know that an increase of 50% in a house, represents quite significance to that area. Anybody else want to add anything? Okay.
Councillor West would love to volunteer if it happens in the next 3 weeks, Chair. If it doesn't, one of the rest of you will have to do it.
At the next committee, we could ask for a nominee at that stage.
Okay. If there's, can we not sort of choose somebody from here, or
we could, if you want, and then sort of.
Well, I'll tell you what.
If we need to come back,
then we can rearrange. We can rearrange as necessary.
Okay.
Do you want to do that then?
Yes. Would somebody like to be a deputy to Councillor West, just in case? Councillor Rawson, just in case. Right. Potential future site visits. Well, before we get onto that, actually, I don't want to forget and say that this is the last committee before the elections, and some of us are retiring, some of us are seeking re-election, and others, for circumstances unknown, will not be standing. But I do wish you all the best, whether if you're standing, all the best. If you're retiring, all the best in your retirement. And if for whatever reason you're not seeking re-election, then I wish you the best in whatever you do. And it has been a joy, I can say honestly, to serve with this committee. I've been on planning for 20-odd years, and we've had a very, very mixed bag here. And, you know, we haven't always agreed, but most of us have put down very good reasons for putting their argument forward. And I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you, and I can only wish you the best in the future. And the other thing I would say is that regardless of whether I'm the chair or whether I'm on the committee, but those of you that have been on the committee this municipal year and maybe on it next year, I hope you carry on the sort of good work and the stance that we've taken on this committee regarding houses in multiple occupation. Our first and foremost duty is upon taking oaths to represent our people. That's what we should be doing. We should not shirk away from the fact that a administration has a particular view. You are here as individuals when you enter this chamber in planning, and you should look at the applications individually and serve the needs of the people. If it goes to appeal and we lose, you know, fair enough. Today we've won 2 and you know, lost 1. So these things happen. But let us look at what has been started for the last year, 18 months. And I think it's about time that we looked at parking as a material consideration for planning. What are we doing to benefit the planet in terms of the climate if people are having to drive around blocks 10 times just to find a parking space? Are we improving the environment by doing that? Are we improving the lives of people, you know, by doing that? No, we're not. And I think our duty should always be to protect the public, the residents of this city, regardless of which wards they live in or which party they have affiliation to. That is individual choice. Each of us represents a party of our choice. Nobody's forced us to go and be with any particular political party. But just remember, the very fundamental thing that we do when we get elected is to take an oath and say that we will represent the citizens of Derby to the best of our ability. And I believe that we started this year to do that. In the past, there have been lapses, but let's hope that the 11 people that come here next year will help support the officers and look after the interests of the residents of Derby. And after that, I mean, we come to the exciting part of potential site visits.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There are a number of variation of condition applications on this list, which are obviously clearly minor, so I will assume that most of those you won't want to see. The first one is 12 to 14 Mansfield Road, which is a variation of the floor layout and ground floor undercroft of this approved apartment building. It was approved in 2015. The next one is a variation of condition to allow removal and replacement of hedgerow and installation of 1.8 metre high fencing in the approved housing scheme off Swarkston Road in Chellaston.
Can I ask if we have any pictures showing the quality of the hedgerow at the moment and how it's being maintained?
We can get you photos. I haven't got any on screen or to hand at the moment.
Because I think that's quite a significant factor on that one.
Yeah. I'll get some.
What is the biodiversity value of the hedgerow at the moment?
Yeah. I'll get the case officer to forward some to you next week or week after. Hedgerow. Okay, the next one is the former Selene site, another variation for the highway mitigation transport assessment. Are you familiar with that? We have the next one is a Rolls-Royce Rainsway outline application for 4-storey office building and manufacturing facility on the existing Rainsway site. Next one, sorry, carry on. Next one you'd be familiar with, it's the Ocor Package 2 application, so obviously it's all works along the riverside, city centre. Oh, I've got them all mixed up, James. Sorry. Pages are the wrong way around. Is it Wilmore Road?
Yeah.
Right, sorry. In the wrong place. This is the diversion of Cuttlebrook as part of the IPD development in Telliston. Okay, Stevenson building a 3-storey extension to Derby College, the education facility on the Roundhouse site. This is a scheme for conversion and roof extension and new 3-storey outbuilding at the rear to form 20 apartments and residential units of the city centre. We have 3 applications for Snelsmore Grange, Bellway development for, again, reserve matters, changes to layout and scale of the residential, all various different bits of the same development. Derby High School, variation of condition again, amend approved plans for the netball and tennis courts playing field application. Drew Lane Car Park, Derby Homes, scheme again for 11 apartments and 6 dwelling houses, 3-storey housing scheme. That's it.
Okay, finally, all that remains for me to say personally and on behalf of the committee is to thank every single officer that's been here, helping us, supporting us, whether we agreed or disagreed with them. They've done an excellent job, and I wish them all the best as well, and maybe look forward to seeing you again next year. Although some of you might say, well, good riddance, right? But thank you very much to all of you, and have a good night.
Thank you too, Chair.